Wild oysters from Prince Edward Island versus cultured oysters. What is the difference? A lot of customers are asking me, so we're going to show you today. I love the wild oysters. I love the cultured oysters. The main difference is the shape of the shell. The taste, the texture, the flavor of the oyster, if it comes from the same water in the same region. Prince Edward Island has 5 or 6 different growing regions. So if it comes from relatively the same region, it's going to taste the same. Just the wilds will have a different shape. We're going to show you what it looks like in this box today. The wilds. These ones come at a very good price. These ones were coming in today at $12.99, 13 bucks for 25 oysters. So first off, I like to show right there, so it's marked on the top, wild oysters versus farmed. This is a standard box. This comes from Island Gold here in Prince Edward Island, which is a great company. They're all very good. They're all great farmers. They create great flavored oysters. But you see here, this is right off the top, a wonky shape, which is great. It's all natural. Here's a great sign of a Prince Edward Island oyster. A little bit of silt, the mud, classic red Prince Edward Island. So these oysters are going to need a little bit of a wash. I'll show you how to do that as well. But as I reach in and I'm looking at what I have inside, a great collection of oysters, all really nice sizes too. But some of them have what I call turn down shapes, odd shapes. Maybe there's something else on it. That's a limpet. We'll scrape it off. Don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine. Some of them might have what's called boring sponge as well. So you have to take a look at those shells. You know, they've got slightly wonky shapes and they're going to be a little bit more difficult to open. That's the only difference between the two of them. Some of them you might get, look, that's perfectly good. Might be a little undersized for a small choice. So they put them into the standard. It all comes together because they're all hand packed. Look at that. It's got a lovely turn down shape. How's it going to look in the shell? We're going to find out. We'll open these ones up first. Standard means wild or odd shaped. Choice means choice shape. And so the cultured oysters are going to be called choice shaped oysters. These are standards. Wild shape, natural shape, and they're going to be a great taste as well. Let's check it out. Once we got this open, let's check this out. This is called cultured oysters. These are barstool oysters coming from rustical Prince Edward Island. You can see just by looking at it, there's a uniformity of the shape and shell. They've all got sort of this wonderful little size grade. This is what farmers do, or farmed oysters are. They grade them out and they see they have a uniform shape and size. They're all going to have that lovely teardrop shape. It's all going to be flatter on the top than it is on the bottom. It's going to be a cup to it. And so what happens is farmers will grade these out into the perfect little shape that you want in the consistency in a box of choice oysters. So that you know that when you get in here, these oysters are actually going to be a little bit more easy to open than a wild oyster sometimes. But both will be able to open the same way. I go in through the hinge at the back, pop it open, cut the adductor muscle, release it from the shell, and serve it on the plate. This one, you know how it's going to be able to fit. All of them have that sort of same shape to it as well. All got that perfect little teardrop shape, and that's what farmers are looking to do. It's the only difference between a wild and a farmed oyster is the shape of the shell. Mother Nature does all the feeding. Farming is not like fish farming where we have to get feed for fish. Oysters naturally feed on phytoplankton and zooplankton. That's provided by Mother Nature. So they're all going to sort of taste the same if they come from the same region. So these are the cultured oysters. We're going to get into these ones right now. So for the wild oysters, the standards from Prince Edward Island, what we're going to do, first I checked out the oysters. You can see there's a little bit of silt or soil on it, which is perfectly fine. It's natural. So you want to give these ones a little bit of a wash. I'll show you how to do this at home. Take your oysters, dump them into the box, all done, into a bowl. And we're going to wash them in the sink. So first off, I would check to see and give it a smell as well. Beautiful. It smells like earth, smells like ocean, and clean smells. That's a happy smell. If there's any off smells, you're going to notice it here right now. Plus, you're going to hear them. If there's anything that sounds hollow, they all sound pretty solid, which means they're good and whole. It's a perfect time of year for oysters now. Anyways, it's late fall, it's early winter. So we're going to start seeing this. I'm going to give these a quick wash in the sink over here. As we got our sink nice and clean, I'm going to keep it in the bowl though. I'm going to rinse it in the bowl. Why? Because when the silt goes down, it'll stay in the bowl. The water will run off and go down the sink. That's sort of a better way of doing it than putting the sand and soil down your sink. Also put a little stopper in there just in case, extra shells and stuff. No one wants to go plumbing after this. So all you do, get your water nice and cold first. Whoop. And if you got one of these, oh, even better. Handy that. We're just going to get the water nice and cold to start with. And then afterwards as well, what we're going to do, if you want to get it really cold, ice bath. Water and ice in a bowl just to chill them down before you shuck them. So let's get cleaning. So just get your hands in there, toss it around. Once you have your bowl full of water as well, you don't have to keep doing more water. Just give it a toss, something like this. Now, if you have, that's a limpet. Yeah, right there. It's a snail. Lives on the outside of the oyster. And it just comes off really easy. It's not that you have to worry about it. It's just something you want to get off for presentation or whatnot. Sometimes on the bottom as well, you'll see, look, baby oyster. So you've got to know that you're going to be looking at these oysters and you're going to shuck it in a certain way. This one had a lot of silt on it. So I'm going to be shucking these oysters onto rock salt. Get it nice and large grain so it's not too fine. It will stick to the shell. It will stick to your fingers if your fingers are wet. So I know that it's going to be, could be salty, could pop into the oyster. So know that that might happen if you're going to serve on rock salt. So keep it chunkier. And the beautiful thing of that, you can actually, if it gets wet, you can dry it out, you can use it again. But that's when you do it at home. At the restaurant level, we like to do crushed ice. Works the best because the oysters really set into it and keeps it nice and cold. Before you set up your oysters for your party, use that bowl that you had, right? You were washing it in, clear it out, get new water, put 50-50 water and ice, get them ice cold and ready to go for when you're going to shuck them. These are the standard oysters. They have some of those wonky shapes, okay? They still all have that teardrop shape to the point where I know where I'm going to open them through the hinge. I'm a hinge shucker, so I go in through the back of the oyster. Cup is the rounded part at the bottom and the flat part or flatter part is the top. And you want to have the hinge point towards your knife hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to have it point to my right hand. So what I'm going to do with standard oysters, the wilds, the natural, au natural oysters, they have wonky shapes. So you're going to have to shuck them a little bit lighter. Don't go in with full force. Go in nice and easy so that you can showcase and you can get that oyster open. So all it is a little, whoop, it slid in right there. So the hinge just broke nicely. So it popped in. Once it opens, you don't have to use any force at all. You're prying it open. Then you scrape across the top. You look for any grit. Lovely looking oyster, eh? And you look for new shell growth right around the lip side right over here. Look at that. That's a pretty oyster right there. That's standard. Now you see how that shell turns up? That's definitely one of those qualifiers that makes it not a choice shape, but a standard shape because it's got wild stuff on it as well. That is another baby oyster. You might want to break that one off before serving it to a customer. There, it's just a little shell, so that'll come off. Flake that stuff off for your customers, then you put it, arrange it nicely on the ice tray or the salt, whatever you're using. Again, I'm going to keep my eye on it, go nice and slow so that I open this up. Sometimes the shell might break. Voila. This one broke right there, so that's fine. Again, nice looking oyster. Wonky shape, but you come across here. This is the beautiful thing about standard oysters or wild oysters. You can get them at a what we call a fair price. You know, something that's a little softer than cultured because fishermen and ladies, fisher people, fisher folk go out and harvest the oysters within their lease. Another one, beautiful. Within their lease area, when they're allowed to harvest it, they go out and they tong them up. In Prince Edward Island, they use tongs. There's no dredges allowed. So they tong them up by hand, and then they take them to a packing plant, pack them up, and send them out in boxes. Here's one that turns down. That's going to be a little bit harder. So what I want to do with a turn down, I want to raise it up actually so that the hinge is pretty well parallel to the table. And that's how high up I actually have to raise this one. On my deck, I can lower it to this point here, and it's got a lot of support. The main thing when you're shucking oysters is really hold on to the oyster so it doesn't wiggle around. Even at this angle, it's a little treacherous, but you want to open it up like that. But you get a perfectly good oyster on the inside. Okay, there's 5. I'm going to do about 10. And I'll do 10 on the other side as well to show the differences. Now you can use your top shells here as well. As I'm saving them up, if you don't even want to put it on rock salt, or you can use your top shells. You can, and I'll do that other plate with top shells to make it look like that. Again, look for any new shell growth around the lip side of it and look for any grit on the inside as the shells may break. and looks to see if there's a shell attached to the mussel, because that one attached to the top shell and didn't come off properly. That's okay. We can just shuck that, make it look good right there. Again, this is another little oyster at the back at the hinge. I like to leave them on just to show the customers or your friends that these are natural oysters. They got natural set all over the place, and they're going to be great. Last oyster, wonkier one again. Just hold on to it so it doesn't move. Pop it. Now that one broke in half. If the bottom shell breaks in half, that's okay. You're shucking at home. At the restaurant level, what I would probably do is save it for chowder if I don't have a good enough shell. And then I can showcase this here. That's 10 on the round. That looks pretty good. All you need now is a little lemon. If you want to do that, some sauce perhaps. Good looking plate of oysters. These are the wild oysters from Prince Edward Island. We're going to taste these in a second. I want to do a side by each comparison to show you what the cultured one looks like to the wild one. Okay, I'm going to just do a show on what you're looking at the hinge. These are the wild oysters from Prince Edward Island. I go in through the hinge again. Hold on to the oyster like you mean it, so it doesn't wiggle around. This is as tight as I want you to see it, so it doesn't wiggle. That allows you to put your knife into the hinge and give it a little turn till it. That's it. That's all there is to it. There's not a lot of force. Then I hold it open. The hinge is broken. The shell is broken in the middle, which is fine. But I'm looking down here to the mussel. I want to scrape the mussel so that it releases and comes right off. That shell's broken. That's okay. We'll keep it. Get any of the grit out and then put it on the plate. Same thing. This one's turning down, so you want to raise that one up a little bit and into the hinge right here. That's it. Natural opening. Give it a little turn and it will open. Beautiful oyster. Look at that thing. Fat and plump. Loose and ready to go. I'll grab the next one. Again, turns way down on this one here, so you want to bring that up. You can almost bring it down to this position here on this deck. Raises it up so that you can just hold on to it so it doesn't move again, and slide your knife in. Sometimes it's going to slide in too far. Beautiful. This one looks a little bit on the thinner side, but that's okay. It's still going to be a delicious oyster regardless. Hit the adductor muscle, away you go. I love the way when they turn down like this, because then you can stack them. Because it turns down, it's got this great position that you can do. This one has a little bit of what's called boring sponge right here. You can see some sponge on the hinge. So that means I have to go really, really light on this because it may just crumble away. Oh, and so as you do less force, you'll be able to get that oyster open really, really cleanly. Hinge was fine. New shell growth right there. Shuck that oyster and it is ready to go. So same thing while we're shucking these oysters. Hinge points to where I'm going to open them. I'm a hinge shucker. It means I put the oyster on the block and I hold it like I mean it so it doesn't wiggle around. That's the best way to do it. Then insert your blade and turning it like a key in a lock with a little forward pressure to get it in there. Right about there. Quarter turn pops it open. Then I'm reaching across. I'm taking a look to see where the meat is attached right there at the top. And I'll scrape off the top shell. That's it. Again, saving that shell for later. Beautiful looking oyster. Nice, round at the front. It's got a little ruffle going on. Oh, the ruffle is always my favorite. Means the oyster is super fresh. The other ones were great as well. We're going to do a side by each comparison. Sometimes this happens. That's called the hockey puck. In shucking, we have to deal with that for the restaurant level. In a competition, I would probably let it go and grab the next oyster. This is because it's going to take a little bit of time. But all we got to do is take that off, because it's just the way the structure of the shell happens to go. All oysters will do that because all oysters grow in layers. Depends on the time of year and how it's working and whatnot. So up we go, across the top. Big fat plump, beautiful. You can see some of them have this dark striation at the lip end of it, the outer end. That's actually, part of it is called the tentacles or cilia that helps grab the phytoplankton and bring it down to the stomach. And so some of these you can actually see it. And the coloration is a little bit different, which is great. When you're looking for a great oyster, you're looking for a uniform color. Some of them can be a little bit darker like this one. Beige with a light brown color to it, a little bit of a darkness, but you can see there's a uniformity through the outer rim, around the outside, the eyelashes we sometimes call it, to right here, but it also matches this darkness in the shell. I don't know if you can see it. The darkness in the shell It's like hair color from what some of my oyster farmers tell me. The differences in colors inside the shell based on the genetics of the oyster. So you're looking for stuff like that. This is a beautiful little oyster. Again, you can see it's darker in meat, but look at that shell. It's got like a purple dark color to it. So that's okay. It's just the natural coloration that happens in that oyster. These are things that you're looking for. If you're looking for something, you're worried about something, smell it. All of these oysters smell absolutely gorgeous. They just smell like fresh ocean air, like super fresh, clean water. It's a wonderful thing to be able to open up oysters and really just sort of smell that lovely ocean. Anything that's off will smell a little bit off. That'll smell like rotten eggs or fermented leaves. These are things that you want to smell for. If you're going to smell your oysters in the restaurant, everyone who's listening, do not stick your schnoz on this. You can do it at home if you want to, that's fine, but this is your own food. When you're in the restaurant trade, you pull this off and you go, beautiful, that oyster is perfect. If you have to second guess it and you think that it's not going to be great, I normally just let it rip as it goes. So I just send it down the river. Beautiful looking oyster though, so you don't even have to even quasi look at or second guess these ones. It's a beautiful thing to do. And here we go with the last oyster. Now these ones won't sit quite as nice because the shells we're doing on shell top, but it's pretty good. I'm happy with this. Just jam it around a bit. A lot of fun things as well. Check that out. So that's a pretty good looking plate. I'm happy with that. The uniformity of the shell and using the shell top in the middle allows the oyster to not rock around. You can take this oyster now, if you're going to do this at home, let's throw a little saran over top of it, put it into the fridge for a couple of hours until your guests arrive. If you want to do this ahead of time and not worry about all that, on the time when the guests are here getting cocktails and drinks for them, shuck it ahead of time. Perfectly fine for hours in the fridge. Just put a little something over top of it so nothing drops into it. All right, now all you got to do is garnish, cut a little lemon, do a little mignonette, do a sauce if you want to, or nothing at all. Pair it up with a nice wine, beer, champagne, whatever you like. We're going to show you the next side by each, the two different ones, the wilds and the cultured. Here we are, we're going to show you cultured oysters, farm raised, that lovely little teardrop shape. I'm holding it so it doesn't move around, no wiggling, into the hinge. Give it a little turn till it sets. That's it. Quarter turn, pop that thing open. Cut across the top, turn it, cut the bottom so it's loose, ready to go. Delish, place it. Grab the next oyster with my oyster knife hand into the hinge, again holding it. That one, see how that slipped? You don't want it to slip. You want it to get to this point here. Open it up, come across the top, cut that. Fat, lovely oyster, eh? Plump, down away you go. Pick up the next one. Hold it up, turn it. I want to show you how I can do this with only 3 fingers of force. Beautiful little oyster. Look how fat and plump that is. So 3 fingers of force means with my oyster knife is what I can do this. When you hold into the oyster, you just get your oyster knife in there. Once it's to about this point, this is as much force as I need. That's it, to open up the oyster. It's the leverage off my oyster knife that kind of works that way. Once it's pried open, you're looking for where it's attached. You cut across the top. So you release it, turn it, hit the bottom. Beautiful little oyster right there. And those are your farmed oysters. Okay, we're going to try tasting the oysters and see what the difference is on each one of them. So we'll just do one of them. These are the farm raised oyster. Got a nice plumpness to it, the deep cup, roughly shell, looking good up there. And you can see it's very textural. You can see that it's solid all the way through and looks very fat and plump. Ocean brine up front, a little mushroomy, which is nice. You're going to get an earthy note off some of them. Earthy mushroom, then a sweet cream butter, and that firm, plump texture to it. Super clean on the finish. Wonderful looking oyster. This one's Barstool from Rustico Prince Edward Island. Let's choose one. You can see some of them have a thinner texture to it versus the other one. If you look at this one, sometimes it's because these are grown and finished on the bottom. These ones are grown up at the top of the water, so they get more food to grow on and feed on, and so there's a fatness to them as well. This is a wild standard grade oyster from Prince Edward Island. Delicious, regardless of shape. This has a sweet salt to the front of it, a little bit different than the brine structure. I don't get any of the mushroom or earthiness to it, but I do get a light, sweet green seaweed finish to this one. It's absolutely gorgeous. Let's just try another one that tends to be a little bit, again, on the thinner side. You can see the cultured wilds, cultured or farm raised. You can see there's a little bit of a texture difference here, which is fine. All oysters will atrophy, which means it's shrunk in the shell the longer you let it sit. So if we do let it sit for an hour or so in the fridge, it's perfectly fine, but expect that your oysters will shrink down a little bit. Let's go. Again, you got that lovely ocean sea salt to it. Very little texture to it because it was a little bit on the thinner side. Delicious little oyster. Let's try this darker one from the cultured side. Because it has a mineral content. Wait till you see the shell. The shell is gorgeous. You can see the ruffling that's going on right here. Big fat, beautiful. Again, beautiful, sweet salt, little earthiness to it, steely clean finish. Absolutely gorgeous shell on the inside. And that's just the coloration and the mineral content in the water at the time that oyster decided to grow up. So either way, if you're going to have some great Prince Edward Island oysters, we can get them at great value and then great cultured. So I think personally, a little easier to open up, less work involved ahead of time, no washing required. You're going to probably have to wash these oysters, but it didn't take that much. I didn't use a scrub brush. I just used cold running water and in a bowl, allow the silt to settle to the bottom of the bowl and went from there. Take your time with shucking on these ones. If you want to get fast, you can do it better on the faster on the cultured ones. Either way, try more oysters. Pay attention. Keep your eyes on the oyster. Hold the oyster like you mean it, so it doesn't wiggle around, and use very little force when you're going in with your knife. Any knife that you want to use an oyster knife. Don't use a steak knife or a pair of scissors or a screwdriver or whatever. Just get yourself an oyster knife. But hold on to it. Whether you have a glove or whether you have a cloth, hold on to it so it doesn't wiggle around. Keep it steady. Pop it open. Let's get shucking.